Joined now by Tom Grundy. He's the editor-in-chief of the Hong Kong Free Press. Tom, I understand you were there yesterday as these protests became violent, the clashes between police and protesters escalating. What did you make of it? What was your sense of how dangerous it was at that time? Where did you think it was going?
Well, those sit-ins have been going on for days, actually, and since about last Thursday, and they've generally been very peaceful, but things really did escalate last night. There were a couple of men, apparently from the mainland, one accused of being an undercover agent of sorts, the other accused of posing as a journalist. Whether or not that was the case, they were besieged often for hours, with the police only intervening about 3 hours later, and the police themselves, clashes broke out between the protesters as they arrived at the airport, with a few arrests made, and it got a little bloody at some point, as well as passengers themselves being obstructed earlier in the day by some of the protesters. This has led them actually today to put out statements, at least on some of their forums and Telegram groups, apologizing for the disruption. But I think, as your reporter said, we're going to still see small groups of protesters down there, despite this injunction and the security checks. The fact is, although they are checking people going into departures, it's very easy to go to arrivals and then simply take an escalator down to departures. So that protest at least will be burning on.
So do you think the protests then reached their climax yesterday?
Not at all. These protests are going to go on, possibly for weeks. We have the National Day celebrations coming up on October 1st, and there's a full timetable of demonstrations set out before then, including on Friday, on Saturday, and on Sunday. That's when the Civil Human Rights Front, which is a huge coalition of pro-democracy groups, is planning their latest rally. They've previously staged 1 million, 2 million man protests against the extradition law and police violence. So as long as we're in this stalemate with the government not budging, we're going to see more demonstrations and possibly more unrest as those frontline protesters become increasingly more belligerent when it comes to facing off with the police.
So China released video meant to intimidate the protesters. Clearly, they have also said that the protests are near terrorist acts. Do you think that that is going to have any impact on the demonstrations?
You can see how any government deeming something terrorism may be beneficial to give them carte blanche to suppress those sort of acts. And that language has been echoed by some of the pro-Beijing camp in Hong Kong today. I think the reality is the local police have a lot more tricks up their sleeve when it comes to crowd control, such as water cannon and tools that they may use. And as long as they remain united, with the government on their side, able to relatively handle what's going on, you're not going to see any kind of military intervention in Hong Kong. I think this may be an effort to try and scare protesters into submission. But really, when it comes to military involvement or troops on the streets of Hong Kong, that would probably spell the end of one country, two systems, the agreement that gives Hong Kong its autonomy. The Tiananmen massacre of 1989 is a scar on the city's conscience, and that's what people think of when they think of Chinese troops. So I'm not sure we're at that stage yet, as much as we've seen these videos going around on state media.
But you wouldn't expect a Tiananmen-style crackdown?
I think not in the coming weeks, but you know, we're often surprised with what's going on here. Who saw what was happening there? You know, coming with the airport, with all flights being suspended, and just a few weeks ago, the parliament being smashed up. So it is true that there are thousands of troops that are based in Hong Kong in their garrisons, and the basic law, the mini constitution, does allow them to intervene at the request of the Hong Kong government. But in terms of it being a financial center, and despite all of these threats, I don't think we're going to see any immediate intervention from Beijing for the time being, despite Trump's comments and some of these videos flying around.
Tom Grundy, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Be safe.